All right, welcome everyone. My name is Mike McQueen, and welcome to For the Love of Libraries podcast. I'm here with Erin Mote. Erin, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm so excited. I actually worked in a library as my volunteer stint when I was in middle and high school. So I have a
Oh,
lot
no
of love
way.
for
You got a
libraries.
little
Yeah,
library in your blood then.
I do. I do.
Uh,
I like had the cart and everything to have to restock those books. Like I'm the queen of the Dewey Decimal.
The Dewey Decimal. I've been a librarian for a long time, and I don't really even know the Dewey Decimal as well as some others, I'm sure. But okay, let's just start off. Introduce yourself. Give us a little background about your experiences, especially with AI, and kind of what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I'm Erin Mote. I'm the CEO of InnovateEDU. We are a house of brands, not a branded house. I say that because we run a number of multi-stakeholder alliances that are at the intersection of K-12, workforce, higher ed, tech, policy, and practice. So we run the EdSafe AI Alliance, which I'm sure we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, but also other alliances like Project Unicorn, which is focused on data interoperability in K-12 education, or Keep Our Communities Connected, which touches libraries because it's focused on broadband access and
Mm.
infrastructure and ensuring that we can continue to sustain investment in universal service funds. So
Okay.
uh,
That's
those are
that's
those
great.
are some of our work.
Oh, that's great. Okay, let's start off with tell us a story about that relates to like a librarian or a library that connects to your heart or touches your heart.
Yeah, well, when I thought about this question, all I could think about was summer reading program at my
Okay.
local public library in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I grew up. Uh, we had like only two libraries because Scottsdale was still pretty small at that time. Now it's huge. We had like the big main branch, Civic Center, and then we had Mustang Library. But I can remember. Every summer, right around the end of May, getting so excited to go to the library and sign up for summer reading and having the opportunity every week to go back, and we got like a prize out of a treasure chest, and we got to
Hmm.
sit there and tell a library volunteer about the book we had read. And I did it for so many years. And now I'm raising two voracious readers. One who also has a reading disability. And so I'm super
Oh.
proud that he's a voracious reader and has dyslexia, which is sometimes hard to build a love of
Mm-hmm.
reading when it's the place that you struggle the most. And so
Hmm.
we are only uh, 3 weeks away from signing up for summer reading at Mustang Library in just 3 weeks. And no joke, my kids this weekend said to me, Mom, when do we start to get credit for reading our books? I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
They're excited for summer reading as I was.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, and I know that part of your background is using AI for inclusion, and that kind of makes sense now with the connection with your son. And
Yeah.
I work at Missouri School for the Blind, so one of the chapters that I just finished last week is about inclusion. It's all about the impact that AI has in different, communities. Okay, tell us recent specific topics that you're most passionate about. Let's just dive right into the EdSafe AI Alliance and any of the other big missions. You're involved with so much. First of all, I don't know if any of the viewers that are watching realize how much work you do throughout the country for AI and for schools and stuff. But I admire you. You're just a pioneer and a leader. And
Oh,
so
so nice.
tell us about some of I mean you've been to the White House, you've just done a lot of really big things. So just give us some background.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I first of all, it's really important to acknowledge that I have a fantastic and amazing and wonderful team at Innovate EDU who does so much work every single day to really bring the field forward and to inform policy through practice. And I am so grateful to just the team that we have at Innovate EDU who is so radically focused on mission and meaning. And so they make my job so easy, to
And
be
then
honest.
about how many people are on your team?
Yeah,
I've
we're
seen
just
pictures of
under
them.
yeah, we're just under 30. And they work across all of our alliances, plus our wonderful marketing and communications team, um, who likes to stay in the background, but I like to call them out in particular. Or our finance team, where nothing runs if you don't pay the bills. So special shout out to
Yeah,
the folks who keep the trains running on time, the marketing and communications, the finance and operations team. But they are really doing such innovative work across the country. I think the things that um, I'm really excited about right now, across the Innovate EDU portfolio, are actually places where the work that we're doing um, is bringing different silos together. So I'll talk about a couple. I'll
okay.
talk about AI, don't worry. But, I think the work that we're doing right now, for example, with the Partnership for Student Success and our Pathways Alliance, is all about putting together national guideline standards for tutor apprentices. So we all know
Tutor.
tutor. So
Yeah.
we know that in libraries across this country and schools and communities, high dosage tutoring has been among the most significant evidence-backed ways that we have recovered from the pandemic and
Mm.
frankly address learning loss for all types of students. Talk about inclusion, right? How do you meet students where they are and give them either the opportunity to accelerate or the opportunity to really fill those gaps. And so one of the things I'm really excited about is the Trump administration's support for apprentices and for apprenticeships, and the Pathways Alliance and the Partnership for Student Success coming together to say, we really need to make sure that those apprenticeships for tutors, whether they're in libraries or schools or community centers, are quality. And so right
Mm.
now they are just beginning the process of writing those national guideline standards for tutor apprenticeships. And Pathways did this for K-12 teachers just a couple years ago. It actually kicked off at the White House, and then we celebrated about a year later. Now we have 47 states who have adopted and are driving K-12 teacher apprenticeships to have quality pathways into the profession for diverse candidates
Okay,
in
so
rural communities, suburban communities, so on and so forth.
and when you say apprenticeships and tutoring, are you talking about like specifically to AI or just about what kind of tutoring are they providing or apprenticeships are what are they
Yeah,
doing?
so I think we're really focused on high dosage tutoring, and some high dosage tutors use AI and some don't. And I think that is I think a really important way that we think about technology at Innovate EDU is that technology should be supporting, not supplanting the educator. We believe that um the most important thing, whether you're a librarian or a classroom teacher, or you're the basketball coach or a tutor, is that you are focused on the human element in education, the human relationships, and a set of skills, competencies, and dispositions that make us inherently human. So, if any of your listeners listened to my congressional testimony a couple weeks ago about AI in education, I really was trying to help Congress understand that the set of skills, competencies, and dispositions that are going to be required of our entire workforce as we think about an AI enabled world aren't just the technical things. They're things like creative thinking and the ability to interrogate the technology, working in multifunctional teams. So, how you engage with people around discourse and dialogue, or creative
Mm.
problem solving. Those are things AI is frankly not going to be able to do um, right now, or I think probably in the future, even with agentic AI. But those are the things that as educators and librarians, we need to be focused on thinking about how we're cultivating those learning experiences for young people that build those skills.
Yeah, and libraries historically have been a catalyst for the job world, like K-12 librarians do a lot of career stuff and connections with books. Of
Totally.
course, academic librarians are helping, students right before they enter the workforce, and then public libraries have often are helping supporting people that are, needing career support or career change, everything. And with AI coming, I mean, it's promising to upend the, entire workforce. So, you know, with your apprenticeships and mentoring, is that can you talk a little bit more about the connection to how libraries might be able to support that concept of mentoring with job marketing or
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things that I would say about libraries that you talked about, and is such a critical role, is that um, they transcend audience in a way that not many institutions do. So, like, young people go to a K-12 school and then they, go to a post-secondary institution, maybe, or a community college, or, a job. But at a library, you're touching senior Americans who are going to need to
Mhm.
have understanding about AI literacy so that frankly they can avoid increasingly more sophisticated fraud and scams that are targeting our older Americans right now at a disproportionate rate. Parents and folks who are in the current workforce to both understand what's happening in the technology, but also to your point about how do I upskill myself maybe about this technology, how to get that baseline foundational literacy. And then, for young people, how do I understand the how the world is changing, and how do I understand the skills and those types of things. And for me, one of the things that I'm so excited about AI right now, which is here, is actually, I think a lot about how if the internet is the democratization of knowledge, AI is really the democratization of expertise. And so, how are you thinking about um, using AI even in the library building to help folks navigate the next book that they might want to read or navigate finding something within your institution? I think one of the things that's really exciting about AI for librarians and AI for libraries as institutions is they have so much information that's already, frankly, probably digitized that could relatively, with very small lift, they could think about ways to engage the public in finding out more knowledge, more information, and about teeing up more learning experiences that get them to those critical skills. So I think one of the things that is really exciting about this technology, particularly for knowledge heavy institutions that have digitized, is it just allows not just knowledge mobilization, but potentially knowledge engagement, which is how folks kind of find what's next, find what's of interest to them, or even just have the ability to ask questions about something that they're really interested in. Does that make
Yeah, I
sense,
mean, there's,
Mike?
oh yeah, yeah, it's incredible. I mean, there's so much power in learning when you can interact with the information, at whatever different possible ways that's possible. But depending on whatever AI system or tool that you're using, it's pretty remarkable at how sophisticated the their how quickly it's advanced and how sophisticated the information that you can interact with is. When it first came, when ChatGPT first came out and everyone was interacting with it, it was, so unpredictable and unreliable. And as it gets better and more accurate, it's pretty amazing. I mean, just today we have this like a lot of elaborate equipment for students and people with visual impairments, and I was asking it some questions about something, and before it had no idea what it was about or any kind of how to guide me, and now it's like it's pretty amazing, especially in this case because so much information that you might find online is few and far between. There's not as much as the cited world with being able to find information, but especially if you pre-train, a GPT with preloaded information that is
Yeah.
correct, it's just the accuracy of information is just staggering at how helpful and transformative it can be.
Yeah, and I think you also need to make sure that you're still critically interrogating the outputs that you're getting because
Yeah.
we know that the inputs are also still not where they need to be. And, I say this all the time to folks when they're like, well, how do I make sure that this ed tech tool, for example, doesn't have bias? And I look at them and I say, all ed tech
Yeah.
tools that use
Right.
AI have bias. So
Right.
now we're not going to have the question about how do I have a tool that has no bias? Because that's impossible.
Hmm.
Let's have a conversation about how you mitigate bias or how you interrogate the tool, or how, to your point, Mike, do you purpose build something using a small language model or a custom GPT that is really built and fit for purpose and only ingests the information or knowledge that you're feeding it to. But general purpose, I think LLMs are still fraught with many errors. I was describing
Yeah.
this to my mom, and she's asking me about AI, and I said, Mom, you know what? I want you to think about it like it's like talking to a really, really smart person that you're not sure if it's lying to you. If they're lying to you. And she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, so you need to figure out if they're lying to you or not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
because sometimes I think we mistake like a like a huge amount of knowledge for expertise. And so you need, again, I think
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
things we all need to be focused on as educators is how are we teaching young people how to interrogate the technology and the inputs and the outputs of this technology.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you about that
Yeah,
because I've been intensely using all the major, mainstream chatbots, and when all the deep research tools came out, uh, y- you know, it's not easy to it's easy to put in a simple prompt, even a really well-written one that's accurate, and then and now lately, they're so incredibly sophisticated, and they can spend 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes researching and organizing the information, presenting it to you. And then what you end up getting is this, anywhere from a 3 page or 30 page incredibly complicated document. And
yeah,
people that use those tools, and I was included in this too, like w- it saves dozens of hours of time, but even just that, like processing and going through the results is not, it's still hard. Like a
yeah,
30-page document that you're going to look, and it's giving you 30 different resources that it collected. So checking all the citations and checking to see if it's accurate and if it's kind of in line with what you're looking for, it takes incredible amount of work and time. And how do you, like, I worry that not enough people do that. And how do you balance the time that it takes to do it correctly versus just trusting and hoping that everything is accurate?
yeah. I think like I'll just give some practical tips, I think, for folks as they're thinking through
Yeah,
this. Like I think in like thinking through when you're using a deep research tool, like saying what's the output you want. So it's gonna craft some oftentimes that 30-page paper. So ask it for, a 10-page brief or a 3-page brief, and and name what your key concepts are. And really, if you're using one of those models, I'm thinking of one in particular from Google, you can actually edit the instead of just hitting yes when it says, is this the way I should do the research? You can actually go in there and read like what their research parameters are, so on and so forth, before and
right,
edit that description. So
right.
I think like prompting is important, but also like naming what you need. Um,
Mhm.
the second thing I would say is always check the sources and always check the sourcing. And ask for
That's hard
sourcing.
though.
It is hard, but like,
Hard.
so you've just said it saved me 12 hours, like to check the sourcing, like even just seeing if that source exists, is like baseline. Second is, you can always ask for detailed sourcing by like APA bibliography citation, and then you'll actually get the page if it's coming from a research report. So there are things that you can do both in prompting, but also in doing the sourcing that can help you make use of those tools. But
Right, right.
I would say to everyone who is listening, never take a document like that without checking those sources, because um, I use it all the time and it just hallucinates on me all the time. It just makes something up. Like we will say that this source exists and it absolutely doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
you have to check the sourcing, and you have to, and if you're not confident about the sourcing, but you like the idea, you can always pull that idea out and inquire to the model where they got it from as a separate prompt, and it'll pull up some additional sourcing materials that you can read on your own. But again,
Yeah.
you always need a 30-page document. So
Mhm.
naming something that's tighter to that model is helpful. But they
Well,
hallucinate all the time. All
and,
the
and
time.
I think too, like one thing that I do is I don't just give, zero prompt, type in one thing and hit go. I like collaborate first for a while. And I don't do that with the deep research tool. I'll just do it with one of the main models. And I'll kind of narrow down, like have a discussion to fine tune before we even enter the actual research to make sure it's going to do what I'm kind of hoping for or wanting. I think a lot of people just do kind of what I just first described, is they just type in their thing and then hit enter and wait for it to come back. And then now they got, this stuff that maybe doesn't match what they needed or whatever, or if it's too much or whatever, but planning ahead a little bit first to be, to set it up to be able to, guide it to what it is that you really need. I think that helps a lot. I'm amazed, and now that memory is starting to get integrated with different models, like to just particular ChatGPT. I've been for the last month or so telling it constantly, remember this and remember this, what I'm working on at the moment. So it has this log of all these memories about what I'm specifically targeting. And then when I ask it to help me write a prompt for maybe another deep research tool, it knows all the guidelines of kind of what I'm looking for a little bit,
Yeah.
and it helps me craft that prompt like so much better than just blah, you know. Um,
Yeah, I think you're getting to, though, the set of things that is going to be like incumbent upon us as educators to help kids understand and to help communities
mhm.
understand, which is like this is a general purpose survival technology, but just like with the internet, which is also a general purpose survival technology, we have to spend time understanding, how to use the internet, what's a good source, what's a bad source. I can remember, having to do that in college, and I think that's something that we have to think about with our education system and in anything we're doing when we're talking about this work is how do we help not just young people, frankly, but like everyone understand like what's the guidelines and the guardrails, how to use these tools. And if if you just sort of like put something in there, you're not going to get the sort of optimal result. You do have to like work with this technology, understand this technology. And there's also ethics in this technology that are really, really important for us to call out, including
It's
what
huge.
information we put in there, right? Like you're an educator who
Mhm.
works with students with disabilities. Um, like, we would never want to put some young person's personally identifiable information into a general purpose AI model, or
Right.
any AI model. And so, how do we help people, I think, understand the promise and the peril of this technology, as we've talked about now, but also like, what are the guidelines and the guardrails for using this technology? Even like in cars, we have speed limits and seatbelts and turn
Hmm.
signals and headlights. And so, how do we think about those elements as educators to really equip young people to be able to use this
Well, and
technology?
and it's such a great point. I love what you just said, and it's such a balance between, see, so many. It's I think an instinct for a lot of organizations and leaders are because it's so unknown, it's scary for so many, and there's legitimate cause for people to be concerned about certain aspects of it.
For sure.
So this fear can often restrict access. So how do you balance when there isn't any kind of policies or guidelines in place, and yet you don't want it to be blocked completely? I mean, getting just internet access is one issue that libraries have been pioneers for fighting for, you know,
100%. Gosh, yes. And
but
we've
how do
that's
you?
with a bunch of librarians fighting for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big push
Yeah.
for every library, but so how do you balance that need to because if we're waiting until we have our own expertise to teach our students or our patrons how to use AI, we'll never get to that point because there's just too much, So part of
Yeah.
it is just like giving them access to it, giving them some tidbits, but without kind of without having any policies or without setting too many rules. Where's that fine line? What are your, what do you think
Yeah.
about that? And
Yeah, I work with school districts across the country who are trying to balance this promise and peril, right? And are having really nuanced conversations about what this looks like, frankly, for young people who are 13 to 18, which might be a different answer versus young people who are 13 and below. Um, and so, I'll say a couple things. This is what I tell every superintendent, every state chief, every national organization. I think I've said it from more stages. I've said it from, sitting, testifying in Congress. We can all build knowledge of this technology, not fear. And so that people can make an independent decision about whether they're going to use it or not. But you have to be able to at least understand the technology, not like the coding, but like what is a large language model doing
yeah,
when
yeah,
it's spitting out that information? What's being fed into these large language models? I think a
right,
lot of people, when they begin to realize that, or they do some like really simple prompting, oftentimes, like, I don't even have to have the conversation about bias. They have the conversation about bias
right.
in the model, or things
So
like that.
you're talking about AI literacy is kind of what you're talking about, like
Totally.
help.
100%.
Yeah,
Like we can all start there
yeah.
with AI literacy. And, I think there's so many great resources out there. We lead National AI Literacy Day along with a consortium of other organizations. And just this year, we had 80 different events across the country
Hmm.
in libraries and science centers
Uh-huh.
and communities and schools and on Capitol Hill and in museums. So everyone can get started with AI literacy. And when people say, okay, Erin, like, what does that mean? Like, where should I get started? I think having a baseline understanding about what this technology is, and also realizing that there are 17 different types of AI generally, and generative AI is one type. There's synthesis AI, there's surveillance AI, all of that. And you don't have to know all 17, but you have to understand that when we're talking about AI, in tech, we're not just talking about generative. And if you are just talking about generative AI, let's just be clear about that because it's one type and it has a very specific set of functions and purposes and that type of thing. So I think understanding what is AI is like
You're
the
right.
very first thing everybody can do. And and then you can get into some of the things I think that are really important. If you're talking about generative AI, understanding like what is machine learning, how do machines learn? That gets you into conversations about what data can I put into this? How do I structure my inputs and my outputs? How do I interrogate what's coming out of these models? And so I think when we start getting down that path, it's inevitable that when we have conversations about AI literacy, we're thinking about safety and accountability and fairness and transparency. And that's those are really important conversations to have. And they're nested, frankly, in having a foundational knowledge of this
Hmm.
technology.
I
Then,
mean, there's so
yeah,
many parallels to literacy to libraries and reading because of the word literacy. It's foundational to what libraries have been doing with their mission for centuries. But what makes AI literacy so different? Because I think of it, there's many different literacies, financial literacy, and I mean, there's so many topics. But what makes AI literacy so different, unique is how quickly how quickly it's advancing and how great it's impacting society. So that can cause overwhelm. Like you and I are, I think, at our hearts, we're innovative technology lovers. Like I know Innovate EDU is your title of your organization. So,
Yeah.
but not everyone, like a lot of, I think the bulk of society is not that way, you know. They're they might not be laggards, but that in between, and that overwhelm of being, having a hard time making sense of it, and then when you add so much information, and then that fearful part of it, like what advice do you have for those people that are overwhelmed and a little bit afraid? Like how do they start with AI literacy? Maybe that's more of the question. Like where
Yeah.
there's so much to pick from. Like,
Yeah. So I think the first thing is like first you're not alone. Actually, the vast majority of Americans, when they're introduced to AI, or someone asks them, are you more fearful or excited about AI? The vast majority of Americans are still more fearful than they are excited. And there's a lot there. There's a lot about I think watching parents, and I think young people see what's happened with social media, and sort of how out of control I think social media has gotten. I think so. There's like reference experiences is what I
yeah,
would say
yeah,
about
right,
that,
right.
and that motivates fear in like a really authentic way. Um, then there's folks who like just don't know about the technology and maybe don't know how much AI is already in their everyday lives. So I always try to start whenever I'm giving a talk, asking people if they use things like Google Maps or if they do online shopping, helping people just be aware of where AI already exists in their common sort of everyday interactions with technology at large, I think is really, really important. And then the third thing I'll say is I think giving people, and you talked a little bit about it, exposure to the ability to go on and just start prompting a tool with, some supports around like, what are you trying to accomplish is really important. Touching this technology, being able to interact with this technology is a really important way, frankly, to not just like overcome fear. I do think that that's really important and build knowledge, but also I think make people critical consumers of this technology. And while I am a
Mm.
tech enthusiast for sure, for many reasons, I also don't want to not say that there is peril in front of us if we do not engage with this technology um, with ethics, with an understanding around how to design for the most inclusive use case possible. It has the potential to widen the digital divide, the digital access divide, and the digital connectivity divide, and the digital use divide. So um, I I want people to be able to have that really important conversation, which is it appropriate to use AI? Is this the right use case? Should we be using this technology in this setting? And so, because I think that um, a human is always fundamentally going to be at the center of education, and needs to be, because that's what the science of learning and development tells us. That's what cognitive sciences tells us. That's actually what evolution tells us, is like the human
Mm.
experience is the centrality of education. Look at Plato and Socrates all the way to today's modern
Yeah,
classrooms. And so how do we make sure that folks aren't opting out of
right.
a technology that I think is going to increasingly dominate what learning experiences look like? I want
Hmm.
that to look really um, holistic around each individual learner. Somebody the other day said something to me about like, you're such a fan of personalization. You've been preaching personalization for a decade or more. And the reality is, yes, I have, because I've started a school. I have taught in a classroom. I have
Hmm.
watched with my own children that when a young person feels seen and known and loved, when their interests are cultivated, when they are engaged in reading text about something that they're interested in, that's appropriately scaled to their reading level, that acknowledges maybe some of the challenges they might have around syntax or proficiency or pronunciation, or multilingualism, that that learner has more confidence to keep going, has more confidence to keep engaging in learning, and that happens because of personalization. And I think the crisis we are feeling right now in our education space, Mike, is the result of us, frankly, like being too focused on rote memorization and
Oh
on
yeah, yeah,
the types
yeah.
of things that do not actually cultivate the learning experiences that result in critical thinking or multifunctional problem solving or working with our peers. And so when I think about those best memories, right, of the library and that summer reading
Mm-hmm.
program, I describe not just reading the book, but having the opportunity to tell that summer volunteer about my book. And
Yeah,
so at the heart of that experience for me in that library that I talked about at the top of this podcast was for sure the book, but it was the person. And
yeah.
I think that's what we need to be thinking about as we think about the intersection of this technology and education.
Yeah. Well, I was speaking to some academic librarians recently and talking about AI agents and kind of explaining how, deep research agents were kind of at the beginning stages of autonomous research,
Yeah.
and there were a few people that like said, I prefer, I think they were maybe research librarians or whatever, but like they were like, no, I'd prefer to do it myself and everything. And what you were just explaining about, how to address, fears and stuff, it took me a moment to kind of, think about what I could say about that. And then what came to my mind was that, our kids are, my quick answer was my goal right there was just to introduce and explain it to help them know that it was out there. To this kind of AI literacy in a sense is just like, hey, this is the thing. Do you know what it can do? And but when I think about our kids, they're about to like at every age, but the younger they are, the more AI is going to be part of their whole entire world. And for the things that scare us adults, our kids have no choice but to learn how to deal with this. They're gonna have to learn how to handle being overwhelmed. And we've already gone through that, when apps came out with, smartphones and tablets and all that, the world of the app store. Like now there's a million apps. How are we gonna handle all this? And the internet too, but AI, like for our own kids is my thought that we have to like kind of not let our own insecurities and fear stop us from helping our kids and our patrons get the exposure and experience they need. And we can better do that if we try our best to build our, foundation with knowledge and experience.
Yeah, and also we have to acknowledge that there are communities and families and patrons who are going to be like, I'm absolutely not touching that technology. I'm not going to interact with it in any way, shape, or form. And so I think sometimes, again, giving them positive reference experiences rather
Right.
than negative reference experiences is really important. And as a mom of a 7 and a 10-year-old, my kids use AI with me and with my husband. We don't let them work with these tools without us being side by side. But I will say, that there are places where it has really unlocked, um, particularly like on some of the image generation, uh, applications of AI, Midjourney, and some of those other applications. Um, it has really unlocked this like level of engagement and like creativity
Hmm.
in my kids that's like amazing to watch. And it's
Hmm.
like um it's sort of like if you have the ability, like my 7-year-old Claire tells fantastical stories. She's like an amazing storyteller, and so she has used AI to like speak into something and then have it like illustrate the picture, and she will literally tell stories
Hmm.
um for hours,
Mm.
and like have these like illustrations pop up of Princess Claire on her journey in the African savannah. And it's incredible to watch
Mm.
young people sort of just like, and then I get to like see the
Yeah.
story too, right? And like,
Hmm.
I think like when if you were to tell a librarian what would it look like to have a 7-year old for 90 minutes take through like what is the equivalent of like a 12 chapter book, adventure book, and be able to like continually stay engaged in that conversation.
Yeah.
Amazing for like
Yeah.
vocabulary, comprehension, storytelling, narrative arc, all the things that like
Hmm.
Claire, my 7-year-old, when she wants to persuade someone, maybe including me, to do something, she's gonna have had all these this time skilling herself
Yes.
into being a great storyteller.
Hey, listen, I have an idea. This is just
Yeah.
a thought. Because right now, the chapter I'm working on right now, chapter 11 in my book is AI storytelling.
Yeah.
So I would love to ask your daughter if she'd be interested if you're okay with it too, like to send me one of the stories or some
Yeah.
snippet or something that
I'll ask
she
her. She's the
shared.
author. She has privileges.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let me respect her intellectual
Yes.
property. I'm happy to act
Do
as her
that.
agent. And
Oh yeah, I have to cut her a commission probably.
no,
No, I'm
no,
just
no.
kidding.
You can pay in Starburst jelly beans. But
Okay.
that's the currency she cares about right now. But no, I will definitely ask her. I think it's,
Yeah.
it's an incredible thing to watch young people um do the passion driven learning that
Hmm.
sometimes this technology can really like scaffold them into. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really important thing. And it's different than just like searching the internet or finding, pictures or images of things that you might find on the internet and put into your book report or your term paper. This is like you seeing your words manifest in an image. And I
Yeah.
think
Right. Right.
that's
Or
fascinating for people,
or
including
or
adults.
video or song.
Video, I mean, I'm
Um,
not letting her do that yet, but
yeah, yeah.
I got some guidelines and guardrails, Mike, in our house. But
Good.
we
Yeah.
do. But like I think that's why, like when you see things like a couple weeks ago at the beginning of April, there was this like make yourself an action figure like AI
Okay. Yeah.
kind of
Uh-huh.
phrase that came out, and I watched all these like very serious adult professionals spend time building their like imaginary action figure because it really like captured their imagination to be an original author or
Mm,
creator. And so
yeah. Yeah.
I think there's like I do think um it's important to acknowledge that there's some of these tools which really threaten or inappropriately um su- supplant the creative process, and there's some places where these tools can really help and support and unlock imagination. So again,
Yeah. Yeah.
every time we talk about this, I think your listeners need to hear that there's promise and peril
Yeah.
in every place, and that we really need to have a nuanced conversation about this. And we can't have that nuanced conversation if people don't even just fundamentally understand what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. It's a great point. All right. I want to tell you one quick thing that relates to what you just said, and then I have one
Yeah,
last question for you.
sure.
Uh, so this concern that people have about AI stealing creativity and stealing your passion, like, you know, oh gosh, it's almost been 2 years now. I took a small group of students to the local public library. They were holding an AI art for teens activity. So they had a local university AI professor come and he talked to the group. And my students, their vision ranged. They were all teens, but their vision ranged from zero vision to fair vision. But some of them, one student couldn't even see the screen, but he knew enough, and he worked with a partner. And so all the students that went were all art fanatics. Like they were really artistic and creative,
Wow.
right? So I told them what it was about, and I asked them if they wanted to go, and they said yes. And so the whole night, like they were so engaged and enthralled. And then on the ride back, I they were exploding. They were like almost crying, thanking me. They were so excited that they got to have that experience. And then I got them all quiet and I said, you guys, on a serious note, like I care about you guys so much, and I love how passionate you are about your art, and I've been really worried that will AI, you know, dissuade you from or stop your love of art, and now that you can just have it create it for you. And all of them like overwhelmingly were like, no, no, not at all. And that was a while ago. So and they still all love AI art and all the different forms of it, but it hasn't stopped them. And some of them even said that it's inspired them even more in their
Right.
own personal artwork. So I think for people that are afraid about this and that, like it's understandable, like you should be, but that there's good things that could come out of it too. Um,
I totally agree with you. And I think like I do think there's a really important conversation I think that's happening, I think in the creative community about displacement and supplanting rather than supporting. And I do think there's again it's important to name that I think there is some rightly deserved criticism
mhm.
of the intellectual property that many of these models just
All
took.
of them, all
Yeah,
of them.
that
Yeah.
just and didn't
Hmm.
acknowledge sourcing and didn't acknowledge creativity, and many of them are retroactively going back in, whether they're being told to do that by their lawyers or whether they're doing that because folks like Ed Safe are saying like sourcing, fairness, and transparency are essential elements of anything that you should be using. But um we should acknowledge that um these models need an incredible amount of inputs and data. And so,
Right.
again, as folks think about AI literacy, how are they thinking about the creative promise, but also how to safeguard if one of those students creates that work and doesn't want a model to take a picture of it and then chew that into their model, how they
Right.
protect themselves. And those are like really important discussions that we need to have.
Right. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
We almost every conversation I ever do with students always begins about ethics related, privacy and ethics and safety. Like
Yes.
it's always, and it's tricky because after so many times they don't want to sound like they're getting lectured to or whatever, but it's embedded into everything that they do with it. Okay, last question. What
Yeah.
advice would you have for aspiring librarians, like the younger generation of librarians that are either just starting out right now or newly in their jobs, the connection to AI, besides
Yeah.
all the other good advice you already gave. Anything else for those? Because here's why. Because,
Never
you
cut the
know,
summer reading program. That would be
okay,
one.
number one. That's
Number
awesome.
one, never cut the
Yeah.
summer reading program.
Okay.
Um, no, I mean, two, I think just get started. I think if you have or haven't touched AI yet, I would say like find a place that you feel comfortable enough to just get started, build that foundational AI literacy, to not be afraid of the technology. You can be critical of the technology, but it's different than being afraid or being fearful. Um, and because again, I think that's the space to go. I think the other thing with librarians is um I'm incredibly conscientious of the fact that you know, as an education sector, I don't think we did a terribly good job of supporting parents, communities, and students
Mm,
uh, with the onslaught of social media. I think we
yeah.
basically said like parents got that, and we are, and they didn't, and they
Right.
needed support from libraries, from educators, from community actors, and I don't want to say we like absconded responsibility, but we're pretty darn close to just saying, well,
Yeah.
that's something that happens in school, so we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
That is not the answer here.
Right.
And certainly like the consequences of that set of choices is long and far reaching, and I think has had massive consequences on youth mental health, on
Hmm.
society, on a whole host of things. And
Yeah.
so I just don't want folks to not learn that lesson
Hmm.
from social media and say, this isn't my job because we
Yeah.
don't have AI
Pawning it
in the
off.
library. Yes, or we don't have AI in the library, or we don't have AI in school. So I don't need to
Hmm.
do literacy. I don't need to be talking to parents and communities and young people about this technology. Let's commit to not make that
Hmm.
mistake again.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
commit to like being students of history and
Hmm.
learning from that mistake. And let's commit that particularly with general purpose arrival technologies like AI or the internet, um, it is a feature, not a bug, that those technologies uh, have disproportionate impact on marginalized populations, that
Yeah.
people with wealth have higher access to those technologies earlier in
Hmm.
their sort of evolution. They have more at bats.
And
Knowing all
education to go with it.
and education to go with it. That's exactly right, Mike. And knowing all those
Mhm.
things, I believe we can choose a different future for libraries, for students, for communities, for families, for educators. But we have to make a choice. And that choice is to engage. And so
Mm.
that's what I would say is my best advice is
That's
just
awesome.
engage.